Google and Verizon are urging U.S. regulators to leave wireless internet services outside of most policies designed to prevent carriers from making some websites perform better than others. Now it's up to the Federal Communications Commission to respond. Our next guest says their proposal will not be enough to convince the FCC to definitely back off of broadband reclassification, but it may lead to some compromise. David Kaut is a telecom regulatory analyst at Stifel Nicolaus. He's also a former industry reporter, and he joins us now from our Washington newsroom. David, I got to be honest with you, I didn't understand all of what I just read, and I think this issue is very confusing to a lot of people. Net neutrality is something that's sort of in the abstract we understand. I mean, but what exactly do Google and Verizon want, and what effect is it going to have?
Well, there's a long-term story and there's a short-term story. So let me give you the broad long-term context. You basically have a fight over the rules of the road of how the internet traffic is going to be treated in a broadband world, which gives much more robustness to the network. So the question is, for the critics of the bells and cable, are they going to be allowed to control their networks in a way such that they can favor their own content or affiliated content or people who pay for content or applications or services to get better services, better quality? And so the critics are very concerned about this, but the bells and cable want to be able to reasonably manage their network for congestion and other issues. So that's kind of the superstructure. What's happened with the FCC is they're the regulatory agency that deals with this issue. They had their authority for this undercut for broadband. And so the chairman of the FCC talked about reclassifying under so-called Title II, which is a heavier regulatory framework. This, of course, has produced a very strong backlash from the bells and cable and their Hill allies as well as their union allies, saying this is the wrong thing to do. You're going to be applying an old phone regime to the broadband internet future. And so the FCC chairman...
And Google and Verizon coming in with something in between, right?
Well, kind of. They've been trying to reach a broader agreement between 6 parties over there, including Verizon and Google. And last week, those talks broke down, maybe not coincidentally, the day after the reports surfaced in the press that Verizon and Google had reached some sort of deal. So the talks broke down at the FCC over finding a compromise, and Google and Verizon decided to put their side of the story out as to what they had agreed to yesterday. And, you know, they largely confirmed what we had heard, that yes, they did have an agreement on wireline broadband traffic to generally prohibit discrimination and prioritization, and they clarified yesterday there'd be a presumption against that. Yeah. And one of the problems is the critics say that would be a loophole, and there's this whole other category of managed specialized services that they call differentiated services that could be a separate toll road, and the concern is that would be where all the investment would go. Is that where the controversy really lies because of this proposal for this two-tiered internet? Because a lot of the public interest groups have already come out in opposition to this. Free Press political advisor Joel Kelsey kind of echoing what you said. He said that this would lead to toll booths on the information superhighway. I think that is their concern. You would have this public internet where generally discrimination prioritization would be prohibited, or at least presumed prohibited. Their concern on the critics' side is that's a little loophole. Their concern, the toll road side, would be a big loophole. So if you allow the bells and cable to do that, then you've created this huge loophole, basically kind of an exemption or an exception that would swallow the general rule. And at the very least, if it doesn't harm the public internet, would incentivize people to put all the network investment into the toll side. And then, of course, there's the second issue that you mentioned about wireless. This would not apply to wireless, the Verizon-Google agreement, except to the extent they would agree to transparency. They'd let consumers and companies know, well, how they're basically treating the traffic. But the critics, and I don't think the FCC either, I don't think they're going to accept that on some level network neutrality is going to be completely outside of wireless. It can be treated differently, but at the end of the day, I think they're going to want it somehow treated under this framework. So we're coming to the fork in the road.
I was going to say, what happens next?
I think the decision's now basically in the FCC, and the chairman over there has clearly evinced an interest in somehow coming up with a middle ground, a compromise. They weren't able to reach it last week. It's not impossible they could try again. He's under a lot of pressure from the public interest groups and some network neutrality advocates to go ahead and do what I was referring to earlier, which would be to just reclassify all of broadband under this heavier telecom framework. Right. And in the short term, that does pose some risks, particularly for the cable stocks, which have proven to be sensitive to this particular issue,
right,
because the investors are concerned cable will not be able to monetize their broadband advantage over the bells in about 90% of the country where they have it, well, and 70% where there's no FiOS.
And David, we're going to have to leave it there. David Kaut, telecom regulatory analyst at Stifel Nicolaus, joining us. David, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.